With Republican Governor Bobby Jindal of Louisiana. That's the thing that trips me up. Also the chairman of the Republican Governors Association. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you. Look, it's early in the morning. People understand.
Exactly, but I should know better, right? So I've been thinking about this morning. Governors have to be reasonable. You have to keep your state functioning. You have to work within your budget. You are very responsible to voters. Voters expect results from a governor. From the outside looking in, how do you think your Republican colleagues in Congress are handling this fight?
Well, two things. Well, look, I'm certainly not interested in trying to micromanage or second-guess their tactics, but you make a very important point. Governors every day, we live under the rules where we do have to balance our budget. We can't just print more money. We can't borrow money. One of the things we've launched is the American Comeback Initiative. As Republican governors, we want to reclaim our brand from Washington, D.C. We think voters are just frustrated with the dysfunction. For too many years, we've outsourced what it means to be a Republican. We defined that in Washington, D.C. The only place in this country you're seeing conservative principles applied are in our state capitals. So governors, for example, Republican governors are fighting for school choice and charter schools, fighting to reform public pensions so they're affordable, renegotiating with public unions to have reasonable balance to protect taxpayer rights, growing the private sector economy. That's what we need to be focused on. And part of the frustration with D.C. is we're not seeing leadership out of the White House, but we're also, I think you need structural changes. It's not just who's in Congress without a balanced budget requirement. You know, they're going to continue to kick the can down the road. Everybody's worried about the debt ceiling. Yeah. The real issue is the debt. We were in the exact same place 2 years ago, and nothing's changed.
Well, when you're talking about trying to reclaim the brand, Republicans in Congress are not necessarily helping that effort, I'll tell you that much. I mean, when you look at it, you recently said, and I like this quote, all of Washington is dysfunctional. It's not just a matter of who is in leadership, but look at the polls. Look at the polls that we have out today. It shows that still, and it continues to look this way, the Republicans in Congress are going to face the blame since the government has shut down and if this crisis continues. That has to concern you.
Look, nobody wants to shut down. Certainly nobody wants to get to a position where the government's not paying its bills. I think the president needs to show leadership. The last time we had these kinds of intense negotiations, remember when you had a Democratic president or Republican Congress? You got policies, for example, like the welfare reform legislation. President Clinton vetoed that twice, but he showed leadership. He found common ground with Congress. By the way, a principle that rose from Republican governor-led states where they said there's a better way to deliver these benefits. That's the kind of common ground. That's the kind of leadership we need today. We're not seeing that. And let's say they kick the can down the road again. Let's say they figure out a way to get outside the debt ceiling and the spending shutdown. The reality is the problems aren't going away. When he was senator, then Senator Obama said $9 trillion of debt was immoral, was too high. Now it's nearly $17 trillion. The real crisis isn't the ceiling. It's the fact we're spending more than we take in. The administration doesn't even have one planned budget, short-term, near-term, medium-term, long-term, to stop spending more than we take in.
Well, that is the problem, that Washington only functions going from crisis to crisis to crisis. I mean, when you look at this, where we are right now, House Speaker John Boehner did not want this fight. He's wanted to deal with the big drivers of our debt, the long-term drivers of our debt. He wanted to avoid a government shutdown. How they got to where they are right now is how the group of conservatives in the House, they pushed this position, and that's where they are right now. Do you think House Republicans overplayed their hand? A lot of this is about policy, but it is also about strategy when it comes to politics.
Again, look, we've got enough Republicans criticizing Republicans. What I do think is we need structural change.
You've done that too in the past, you know that.
We need structural changes in D.C. I compare it like that, and I don't mean to insult my kids, but it's almost like kids in their homework. You know, D.C., it's almost like they'll never do it till, you can tell kids, my kids anyway, look, you've got a week to do a report. All seems to happen the night before. And Congress in D.C.
Do you think it'll get done?
D.C. the same way. I think it will get done, but I think we need structural changes. I don't think they're going to confront the tough decisions about reforming entitlements, about cutting spending, balancing the budget until they absolutely have to. They need the pressure of deadlines. They really need structural reforms. Make them have a balanced budget amendment in the Constitution, require a supermajority to raise taxes, require a supermajority before they can grow the government faster than the economy, put term limits, make them a part-time Congress. All of those reforms we've got in our Constitution in Louisiana, I think they'd work in D.C. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter who's in the majority, the personalities, who's in leadership. You need structural changes to force them to make the tough decisions.
The big problem is if nothing else, there's a huge trust deficit. John King and I feel like that's what we talk about every day in our gut check, is that the two sides do not trust each other to get past this crisis and deal with those long-term problems. Let me ask you this. We are in the middle of a crisis. There's no question about that. Do you think that in the absence of actual negotiating at this point, when you're up against these deadlines, that the House should pass, or how about this, the House should allow a vote on a clean funding bill and a clean debt ceiling increase?
But look, here's the challenge. Let's say you did that. We'd be exactly, this is what happened 2 years ago. And we were told 2 years ago that there'll be time to address the entitlement programs and the spending and the debt, and nothing changed. Here's my concern. Everybody's focused on...
So no.
My concern is everybody's focused on the crisis of what's happening today, and this is bad. Nobody wants to shut down. We've got to deal with the bigger issues. And if we don't,
Agreed.
The real issue is we're spending more money. Look, our debt's bigger than our economy. And at some point, we can't just keep printing money. At some point, we can't keep borrowing from China and others. At some point, we can't just keep on spending. At some point, we've got to grow the private sector economy.
But at some point, you're going to hit this deadline, and that some point is Thursday of next week. What do you think is going to happen if we pass that deadline? Do you agree with the economists that it's going to be catastrophic?
Look, again, I'm not advocating at all that we stop paying our bills or that we not pay our debt, certainly. The president needs to show leadership. The president needs to stop saying it's my way or the highway. The president needs to say to Congress, let's find common ground. We got all elected by the American people to serve them. The president's not running for re-election. Maybe they think this is good for them politically. You've cited the polls showing that Democrats think this is better for them. He needs to stop thinking like a partisan leader and start thinking like the American president that he is and say, all right, what's good for the entire country? What's good for the entire economy? It's like the American people are saying, we've watched this movie before. 2 years ago,
we have.
That's right, and nothing changes. So even if they get a short-term solution, we're going to be right back here again. American families can't spend more than they take in. States can't spend more than they take in. Neither should the federal government.
And it sounds like some of your Republican colleagues in Congress should be taking a hint and a little help from the Republican governors.
We certainly think so.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right.